And I believe in my heart of hearts, and I have reason to believe this, that he was part of some operation that he was aware of. Whether or not he knew it was going to result in the death of Charlie Kirk, I don't know. But I do believe he thought he was part of a criminal operation that day. But I do not believe that he was on the roof. I don't believe he took a shot with a 30-06, and I don't believe he killed Charlie Kirk.
Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. This is Clint Russell. I am joined by my co-counsel this afternoon, Mr. Baron Coleman in the building. We've also got Buckley Carlson. I am thrilled to have you guys. I think that this is going to be a fantastic conversation. I've been looking forward to this for weeks since we got it on the docket, so I appreciate your guys' time. Let's hop straight in the deep end. I am, unfortunately, totally oblivious to the latest developments in the courthouse today in Utah. I did follow it very closely yesterday. Baron, you were saying before we started that there is the state is not doing so hot today. So if you could bring us up to speed, I'd appreciate it. Well,
there were a couple of items that to me were so massive. I'm surprised they're not getting more play. And it is, they have a really grainy footage taken about 12:30 in the morning and again about 1:15 in the morning of a Dodge Challenger pulling up in front of a Ring doorbell camera. We've been told that was Tyler Robinson. We were told on the arrest affidavit it was Tyler Robinson. We were told in the search warrants it was Tyler Robinson. We're now told the homeowner who recorded the footage signed a letter with the footage that says the car was driven by a bald man and that there were 3 passengers in the car with him.
And do you remember that the Nobles told you that the driver of the vehicle was bald?
I do remember that being in the report, yes.
And you didn't mention that today when you were talking about that Ring camera, did you?
I did not.
And did they also tell you there were 3 other people in the car?
Yes, I believe they thought that was the case.
Okay.
That's not Tyler Robinson. Now, either the homeowner is wrong, and that's certainly possible, but I think that should have been disclosed publicly if you're not going to call her as a witness, and they don't seem to have any intention to call her as a witness. It's deeply deceptive. It's incredibly misleading. It's bad faith all over the place, and the judge seems, at that point today, to have sort of turned, and his attitude has soured quite a bit. So I think that's the biggest bombshell of the day, is the homeowner who recorded the Ring doorbell footage believes a bald man drove the car and that there were 3 passengers.
That's revelatory if they're correct, of course. Am I understanding correctly that this surveillance footage from the Ring door cam was the nighttime when he allegedly went back to get the rifle?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the middle of the night, 12:30 a.m., September 11th. That'd be Thursday morning.
That's interesting because I thought that they said that they had the, I don't know, geo-tracking or whatever, the cell phone data said that he went back there in the middle of the night. So if that's not him in that vehicle, that's, oh man, that throws a huge wrench.
Maybe he was one of the passengers. Maybe he was one of the passengers. But we've been told, Clint, he did this alone. He planned and executed Charlie Kirk alone. And that is inconsistent with 4 people being in the car at 12:30 at night.
Oh, that's huge. Well, Buckley, I'll get your take on it. I mean, I don't know how closely you followed either today or yesterday's court proceedings. And obviously this is not the real trial. So we're kind of grasping at straws to even evaluate what we're going to be dealing with once the trial really starts. But, wherever you'd like to start, I'm just curious what your take was.
No, I've been following it pretty closely, and I'll confess that Baron has actually been one of my sources, of course, because he's an expert on it. So
me too.
I just want to say the other thing that seemed totally shocking was wasn't it revealed this morning also that Tyler Robinson was caught on camera in a parking garage, and then the cop testified that he'd met with Turning Point representatives that morning. That's the first I've heard of that. True? Yeah, that's yes. Brand new and super shocking, is it not?
It's again, totally contrary to the narrative. The testimony was that he showed up at 8:30 in the morning at a parking garage, walked over to the quad area where they were setting up for the Charlie Kirk event, and made contact with TPUSA representatives. They didn't say who they were. That has never been disclosed before. And again, the question is, why have we been sold one version of this story if they've known the entire time all these additional facts are at play? Why have we not been updated every step of the way so that the public isn't being brainwashed that it was Tyler Robinson alone when the reality is that case seems to be falling apart.
Well, and then additionally, I guess the first cop on scene, allegedly, that was the big bombshell from yesterday, is that his body cam footage shut off right as he's discovering the notorious and super critical, part of the prosecution's case, which was the screwdriver on the roof, allegedly.
While you were on the roof, did you encounter any spent casings?
As a matter of fact, no. That's why when I saw the prone position where a person would be laying down as a sniper, being around guns and snipers all the time, I was looking for a spent shell casing. I couldn't see one. I was looking over the edge, looking all over the place, making sure the gravel wasn't disturbed, and I couldn't find a shell casing at that moment.
And that would be, the reason you would be looking for that was because some types of guns, when they shoot, eject a casing automatically, right? Some
Yes.
do. Your body cam footage that I reviewed appears to end while you're still on the roof. Do you know why that is?
I think the battery went dead. It was just right at that moment.
Okay. And do you know, did you ever turn it back on that day or go get it, I don't know, what do you have to do, charge it or stick a new battery in it? I don't even know.
Usually dock it, but no, I didn't go back. It was too chaotic running around.
So that 27-minute and 35-second body cam that starts when you're at the Hall of Flags and ends while you're still on the roof, but haven't put the crime tape up yet, that's the only body cam you have that day?
Yes.
Great.
These batteries last 12 to 14 hours usually, so pretty inexplicable that the battery would have died that quickly, unless he was pulling a double shift or something crazy like that. I would also like to get into what felt to me like a very concerted attack upon one Candace Owens yesterday, right as the first day of fairly legitimate court proceedings began. It seemed as if all of the gloves came off all in unison across the TPUSA board, the Jeremy Boring, side of things. It was just a full frontal attack on Candace Owens. Did that feel concerted to you guys as well, or am I reading too deeply?
No, it was remarkable, I thought. I mean, Andrew Wilson, Andrew Colvett, Blake Neff, all of the various Zio surrogates that seem to be involved and aggressively interested in nobody asking questions about the narrative or nobody assailing what is obviously a fantastical story from every element, obviously, not just from the 30-06 that so clearly didn't take his neck apart, but every element of the story. You're just not allowed to ask questions, and you're an evil person for doing so, and you're assailing the widow. I mean,
I
yes,
thought
I've never seen. Sorry.
I just want to say, I thought what was interesting about that too is, that you're right. That has been their claim, that to question the prosecution's narrative as to who took out Charlie Kirk is to ultimately undermine his legacy somehow or to despise the man. And yet that was Andrew Colvett's number one tactic to attack Candace Owens yesterday, was to absolutely undermine Charlie Kirk's legacy, to essentially call him a liar and a coward over and over and over and over and over again, and to get furious with anybody that would question, that position. I just thought it was stunning, honestly. I mean, I was not a huge Charlie Kirk booster. I had very significant and serious disagreements when it came to many of his policies, his policy proposals, foreign policy, his affinity for Israel being at the top of that list. But he always struck me as a fairly courageous guy, a guy who came from a place of kind of love and a higher power, and did not have any of the Andrew Wilson debate tactic traits in him where he's just out there to rip people's heads off. He seemed to wanted to convert hearts and minds. And he definitely didn't seem the type that would be scared of Candace Owens, which is essentially what Andrew Colvett said multiple times yesterday. So I'll go to you on this one, Baron. I was shocked by it. I'm sure you were too.
I was, because again, I think you stated it rather nicely. I might add to that if you're going to attack Candace, and if your sole source of that attack over the course of the entire day, and that's what took place this week with Andrew Colvett, if the sole source of your attack is Charlie Kirk lied to your face over and over and over. He said that he liked you. He did not. He said that he had your back. He did not. He said he supported you. He did not. What you're doing is burying Charlie Kirk's integrity. Like you said, turning him into a coward, sure, Charlie might have been a lot of things. And like you, I had disagreements with him, particularly around the foreign policy arrangement. Not so much on the religious stuff, not so much on his domestic policy, but on foreign policy, I vehemently disagreed with him for probably 5 of the last 7 years. The last couple of years, he sort of started coming around. But what I never assumed about Charlie was that he was a deeply dishonest human being. That never crossed my mind. I thought he was a man of integrity and somebody who just reached a different conclusion than I reached. What I learned yesterday, if Andrew Colvett can be believed, is all the people who spent their time kind of fawning over Charlie Kirk were deeply deceived, that they were misled. And that is a tough position to adopt if you're Andrew Colvett. He is still the chief spokesperson for TPUSA. He's still the chief spokesperson for the company run by Charlie Kirk's widow. And what he's doing is burying Charlie Kirk's legacy under a heap of dishonesty and lies and lack of integrity. And I think it's disgusting. I don't know that he planned that out when he went into it yesterday.
Well, I find it very hard to believe he didn't plan that out just because he's so calculating. They've had 10 months to basically prepare this assault plan against Candace, and for it to have gone so disastrously, it almost makes you feel like, all right, if you're going to take this tact, which is so devastating to yourself, how much worse is the alternative that Candace is telling the truth? You know, like, is that where you're at, that it's just pure desperation? But just to your point, real quick, Barron, about, Charlie's, I have actually grown to respect Charlie more after his passing because of the deep dive that you and I have participated in when it comes to trying to figure out what happened to him and seeing the kind of behind the scenes communications, largely thanks to Candace Owens. It has demonstrated time and time again that Charlie demonstrated courage in the face of significant multi-million-dollar donor pressure to put on people like my friend Dave Smith or your brother Tucker Carlson. He seemed to have, almost unbelievable amounts of courage when it came to that. I mean, we were talking about hundreds of millions of dollars and basically rug pulling his entire empire, and he was still staring into the face of that and saying, fuck you, no. And then two days before he passed, he actually said it explicitly. I have no choice but to abandon the pro-Israel cause. I mean, we all know what kind of gravity that carried with it. So I don't buy it. I think Andrew's lying. I don't know exactly why he's lying, but I do not buy for a second that he wasn't close with Candace. Anyways, I do want to ask you about this, Buckley, because I'm sure you take it personally, given that you've been able to see the communications that demonstrated that Charlie was standing by your brother when it came to platforming him and the massive cancel culture move that was trying to oust him from the public arena. Much to our amazement, it did not succeed, thank goodness. But yeah, what were your thoughts?
Because, well, I can hardly improve upon what you both said, except to emphasize, yes, that Charlie was incredibly courageous, obviously had integrity, was obviously honest, was obviously a straightforward person in public and also in private, because, well, we've all been privy to his texts now, but people who've communicated with him, at great personal peril, obviously, he stated his opinions clearly and forthrightly. He did so in public multiple times, as you've just referenced. So yes, for Andrew Colvett and Blake Neff both, to make it a little personal, it was personal for me because I've known Blake Neff for a long time. And for Blake Neff to come out and call my brother a liar when he made just a very straightforward and obvious statement a couple weeks ago, which was, I don't believe that Charlie Kirk was killed because he was upset at the training community. It was because he changed his opinion on Israel. And that's well-documented fact. It's obvious to anyone who's honest and looked at this and looked and saw who had the most to lose from Charlie's change of opinion, from Charlie's enlightened opinion, and from his ability to give them the Heisman when they wanted him to do something and take money for a position that he was unwilling to stand up for. So that right there proves that he's not the kind of man to lambaste Candace in private with Andrew Colvett and others. He would have just told Candace, and he did tell Candace when they had disagreements, and he said it publicly. He was never afraid to stand up for what he believed in. So I'm torn whether or not it's whether he planned it, I don't really know. I don't know how to assess what Andrew Colvett is doing. I can hardly believe he's a PR executive, the way that they've handled this over the past 9 months. But again, to your point, Clint, it's hard to understand that he wouldn't have anticipated how they would handle this first day in court. So it must be calculated on their part. But boy, it's done more to eviscerate public opinion towards Turning Point and their efforts, I think, than anything over the last 9 months.
Well, I just want to point out too that they knew Candace Owens was off this week, so I think it was very calculated that this is the first day of semi real court. Candace is off. Let's own the narrative. We have not owned the narrative for 10 months on this story. We're going to own the narrative today, and let's just hope that Candace is away from her phone so we can get away with it. And it didn't work.
Pretty bold move, considering she's demonstrated that she follows it very closely and is willing to respond at all times.
Oh yeah, no, she had the battle bun, so to speak. And I think, what was most, to me, as someone who I try and be impartial on this stuff, I'm really interested in the truth on this trial. I look at it and I'm just like, who's providing receipts and who's not? And Candace is laying out receipts over and over and over again. And then you just get these hearsay stories that are completely conflicted with everything we saw from Charlie in the public eye. And then we're just supposed to take your word for it after you have obfuscated and hidden away significant areas of inquiry for 10 months. And I'm supposed to just take you at your word? Like, no, dude, you haven't earned that from me. Whereas Candace has demonstrated sincere, dedication to getting to the truth. So it's just like, I don't know. I don't know how anybody comes away looking at that. If you follow this closely, I don't know how you come away going like, oh, that was a great move by TPUSA. They dominated that one.
Plus, you kindly use the term obfuscate when I think it's been demonstrated that they've flat out lied about really important things early on, and especially his position on Israel, the pressure that he was under from the Ackmans and the Shulmans and from the Josh Hammers and the Seth, whatever that silly, formerly entertaining Seth Beebe guy was. Yeah, so they've done much worse than just obfuscate, I would say.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. They've done some obfuscation and then some overt lying. Actually, Baron, it looked like you had something to say, but I'd also like for those that are not familiar with this story, if you want to take a couple minutes just to lay out kind of the defense's case if you were in charge with that duty, what would be like the 4 or 5 biggest things that you have a problem with when it comes to the prosecution's narrative?
Well, one thing is you don't have any identifiable video evidence placing Tyler Robinson at the scene of the crime. You have him near the scene of the crime, allegedly on camera, but they are at best questionable videos, very, very grainy, very distant. Oh, he showed up at 8:30 in the morning. Here's a picture of a guy walking in who's about the same build and wearing a set of clothes. He's about 6 feet tall and he's white. He's wearing a hat. We're claiming that's Tyler.
There had to be 10,000 guys that on UVU campus that looked like that day, by the way.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. But not only that, they claim because they saw a guy in a stairwell who kind of looks like Tyler, and then 8 or 10 minutes later, they see a little figure about, seriously, that big running across the rooftop, that has to be the same guy who was in the stairwell a little bit ago. Well, when you're talking about depriving a man of his life, his liberty or his life, upon a guilty conviction, you better be awfully doggone sure that's the same guy who was just walking up the stairwell. And the testimony is that nobody knows that it's the same guy. There's no way for them to know. They can't identify it. There's no identifying characteristic on his face. There's no identifying characteristic of his clothing. And so that's probably a massive hole. That's reasonable doubt alone right there, I would think. The second problem I think they're going to have to overcome is the nature of the wound to Charlie Kirk does not appear to match what many of us perceive as the wound that would be caused by a 30-06 from 142 yards away. I've fired a 30-06. I know a lot of people have. I've never hunted with a 30-06, but I've hunted with a 308. I've hunted with a 300 Win Mag, which is actually a little bit stronger round. But the exit wounds, the damage cavity, I mean, it is just night and day difference from what you saw in Charlie Kirk's neck. Your neck is what, 4 or 5 inches, maybe at most, front to back. It's all soft tissue. It's vascular tissue, muscle. very little bone, and the bones that are there are actually spaced out and have soft tissue in between them. And we're told that 3,000 foot-pounds of force that arrived at the front of his neck somehow just slammed on the brakes and didn't really do much damage at all. I became interested in the damage when I started looking at YouTube videos of people shooting various objects with 30-06s, everything from pork roasts to frozen turkeys to deer, cast iron skillets. I mean, you just can't find an example of someone shooting something and providing as little damage as was done to Charlie Kirk. And so those are probably the two biggest holes when you talk about reasonable doubt. I think anybody on a jury is going to look at that. The rest of it really starts to go into, was he set up? So we have these text messages that are alleged confessions. We have this letter that's an alleged confession. How do we know Tyler Robinson actually sent any of those? All we have are pictures of the text messages. We don't have the metadata. We don't have the extraction from the phone. We don't have any GPS data of where it was originated from, what device it was on. I have Apple products all over the place, iPhone, iPad, MacBook, Mac Mini. If I send a text from any of those, it goes to all of them. And so, that alone makes it problematic when you just have a picture of someone's screen showing that I allegedly sent a text. Well, which device did it come from? Did it come from my phone? But even more than that, if you look at the analysis of the text messages themselves and even the alleged handwritten note, it never says, I killed Charlie Kirk. All it says is, I had the opportunity. I mean, it would have been the same confession if he was just part of a plan and performing a supporting role. If he was just a getaway driver, if he was just supplying a rifle to the scene, if he was just supposed to be in the area to gather clothes up and throw them away, it would have been the same text messages. It would have been the same letter to Lance Twigg. So even if you accept those are his, they don't say he actually pulled the trigger and killed Charlie Kirk. And when you start to look at this, now you can get into things that happened after the fact. They paved over the crime scene, like literally paved over the crime scene on a Sunday morning in Utah. And not only that, they dug up 10 inches of the scene before they had a paving contractor in place, such that the person who dug up the scene said, we have a paver emergency. That's the first time I've ever heard those English words put together in that order. He
alleged that it was ordered by the governor of Utah and the FBI to get this done quickly and quietly. Quote, I was like, what are we doing here?
Well, and then you have, he had his DNA on a screwdriver at the scene. There's his DNA on a rifle at the scene. Well, I have a lot of rifles. I have a lot of handguns. I have a lot of weapons. My DNA is all over all of them, because you don't typically wipe them clean of fingerprints and DNA before you put them away after going to the range or after just handling them. And so anyone grabs a rifle of mine and transports it to the scene of a crime, it's going to have my fingerprints and DNA all over it. It might have other people's, it might not. Depends on how they handled it. But as far as mine, it'll have it. So that's not very compelling to me. That doesn't really build a case against Tyler Robinson. He has his screwdriver was found on the roof. Well, do you have an image of him dropping a screwdriver? Do you have an admission that he took a screwdriver to the scene? That becomes problematic because, again, you grab any one of my screwdrivers out of my toolbox, they'll all have my DNA, they'll all have my fingerprints. And so there's just not much of a case. When you talk about, again, you're depriving a man of his life, state-sanctioned killing, you better be awfully doggone sure you've got the right guy. And I'm not sure they have a case to that's compelling enough for that. You guys were talking a second ago about the attacks on Candace Owens that started yesterday on day one of the preliminary hearing. I've been hearing for weeks, maybe months, from insiders that the prosecution is not at all pleased with this case and that they believed it was falling apart. I think we've seen the last couple of days why they felt that way. And if they knew that, if those insiders knew that, if I had heard that, you don't think TPUSA insiders had heard that? Erica Kirk has 4 lawyers that have made a notice of appearance in this case. 4 separate lawyers. Those are 4 legal professionals who can interact with the prosecution, who can interact with law enforcement, who can interact with the court. If I've heard that, I'm assuming they've heard that. And if they heard that, the attacks against Candace might make a lot more sense. Let's get the eyes off of this preliminary hearing and focus it on Candace Owens because this preliminary hearing is probably not going to go very well.
By the way, I did see something that you were on a podcast yesterday. You said you think Israel killed Charlie Kirk.
I did not say that.
What was?
I did not say that.
Okay, what was the clip then?
I said, I've never said that. Okay. I know a lot of people, including in the Trump administration, who think that. However,
Most people know that there's chlorine in their tap water. They smell it, shrug, and then drink it anyways, because they've been told it's what keeps their water safe. What they haven't been told is what chlorine becomes after it's added to their drinking water. And what I found is exactly why I filter all of my water through Cove Pure. Chlorine itself isn't even the biggest problem. Chlorine levels in your water are regulated, but what's not regulated is chemicals that form when chlorine reacts with naturally occurring organic matter in your water. Particles from rivers, soil, plant matter that make it through the treatment process. It creates chemical byproducts called THMs. The government itself calls THMs probable human carcinogens, and they've been linked to disruption of your gut and cancer. Those pitcher filters that you get at the store will not fix this. They improve the taste of chlorine, but THMs require something far more powerful. And that's exactly what Cove Pure is. Clear wave reverse osmosis technology is certified to remove up to 99.9% of contaminants. It's not just chlorine or THMs, fluoride, PFAs, pharmaceuticals. If it isn't water, Cove Pure removes it. It's super easy to set up. The temperature setting for hot or cold water is great, and it tastes amazing. Clean water is one of the best investments you can make for you and your family's health. And because I've partnered with Cove Pure, you can get up to $250 off for a limited time. But you've got to use my link if you want that discount. Go to covepure.com/liberty right now. Again, that's covepure.com/liberty and check it out today. Interesting. And then I'll just add to that because you already laid out a very good case, but I think that the Mauser 98, my understanding is that it would have ejected a cartridge. I find it fascinating that apparently Tyler Robinson, in scare quotes, was with it enough to get rid of that cartridge, but dumb enough to leave a screwdriver behind that was used to put together the rifle. I also don't buy the fact that he had that rifle broken down in that backpack or down his pants leg, and he used a single screwdriver in a matter of 4 or so minutes to put it back together, have it zeroed in perfectly, and then land a single fatal shot to Charlie Kirk. It all strains credulity, I think is the phrase. So I struggle with all of that, but I want to get Buckley in here because we've been going back and forth. So is there anything you'd add as to, areas of confusion or lack of being convinced?
Yes, I don't think anybody's answered sufficiently the foreign angle that Joe Kent was looking into, the various cell phones, the George Zinn jumping up within seconds of Charlie's death and raising his hands and saying, "I did it," and creating a diversion. The cell phones. I also it bears thinking about. The actions of a security team just made no sense. I'm not in personal protection, but I do know enough to know that when there's an event like this, you look for additional threats. And if you study the video, you don't have to study the video. If you just look at the video, you can tell that not a single member of the security team had a defensive posture at all. They all determined that it was safe immediately. And Charlie's staff ran away. Again, you can't account for the way people act when some chaotic event like this happens. It's scary. But the idea that everybody ran away and then everyone declared that Charlie was shot and dead when they couldn't have verified that just makes literally no sense to me. And then beyond that, I don't understand. No one has ever explained the rationale behind the FBI's involvement, because there's a protocol you have to follow before the FBI is involved. No one has ever explained to me what's wrong with asking questions. And again, why those people closest to Charlie around him now, who still use his name to carry on his show and his organization, why they would be so reflexively offended when others are trying to solve this murder. If, as Barron says, and other people have noticed, when you're looking at the prosecution's case and it has all these glaring holes in it, when the FBI's narrative is so clearly false, I would say, why aren't the people most invested in why aren't the people around Charlie the most invested in finding out the answer to these questions? Why would, if I put myself in this situation, if my brother was killed, if my best friend was killed, if anyone I loved was killed, I'd be asking these questions even more aggressively than I'm asking them now about Charlie Kirk. And who wouldn't expect their friends and loved ones to ask those questions, and why, and what's wrong with doing so? And it seems very suspicious or baffling that those who are asking the questions are being attacked for it.
Well, and being attacked by his loved ones, the people who you would think would be seeing this all the same way, that like, hey, this is weird. There is a lot of holes in this. Why are there so many holes? Why are you all pretending as if we're crazy for seeing all of these holes that we've just laid out over the past 10 minutes or so? I mean, and there's 50 other things that are totally bizarre. But just those 10 or 12 ought to be enough that we should all be on the same page. And the fact that we're not really rubs me the wrong way. In some ways, I flip back and forth between like, all right, they're in on it, or they do see what all of us see, and they're scared to death because they think that they're next. And I don't know how to read it. I know Tucker has made this point many times too, that, he kind of feels the same way about trying to, the similarities are stark. I mean, they're unbelievable between the Butler attack against Trump, his flip in persona, his disposition, his policy positions, and his complete lack of curiosity when it came to whether or not crooks acted alone. Like he couldn't care less. And it feels
you suddenly
like,
wield the power to find out, and then you're not interested in finding out.
Yeah, he must have gone to the Dan Bongino school of being the president of the United States. It's very upsetting to me that this is on both of the, and these are 140-yard out sniper shots. It's like the similarities are jaw dropping. I don't know. Any thoughts, Barron? I've been talking too much.
Well, if we're going to talk about things that happened in the immediate aftermath, as Buckley said, his security team, they picked him up off the ground with no regard whatsoever for his head and neck when he took what they believed was a rifle round to the neck. They were not plugging the hole. They were not carrying his head. There were no protocols followed that would normally be followed in a situation like that. And then they chucked him in the side of an SUV, quite literally like a side of beef. Like I've seen cows handled, dead cows handled with more care than they chucked him in the side of that SUV. And then the SUV is promptly towed away from the hospital, sent to an auction house, cleaned up and sold in the dead of night. Like that is so weird. The FBI comes and confiscates the cameras allegedly from the hospital. That's really weird. People weren't allowed to go into the hospital, out of the hospital. That's really weird. There's just a lot of things. Like if you go into the immediate aftermath, why did Terrell Farnsworth, why did one of TPUSA's contractors who was there to do audio and video that day, why did he jump up on a wall and record himself saying they killed Charlie, they shot Charlie, Charlie's dead? How did he know? And even if he suspected that, what a weird reaction 25 or 30 seconds after your good friend is shot. What a weird reaction to pull out your camera and do a selfie declaring him dead. And so if you go to the aftermath, it gets really dark and weird. And the more months that rolled on, the darker and weirder it got when you start talking about TPUSA, how they responded to this, and in particular, how TPUSA began to evolve as an organization in the immediate aftermath. Charlie was clearly articulating one foreign policy position with respect to hostilities with Iran. And then all of a sudden, TPUSA can't figure out what Charlie would have said about hostilities with Iran. Charlie was having certainly an evolution on our greatest ally, and some of their. I'm not saying he abandoned them entirely, despite his text. I'll even give him the benefit of the doubt that he was just venting. But certainly, as he was going on the Patrick Bet David podcast, his own podcast, conversation with Ben Shapiro on his podcast, he was certainly evolving on the issue to begin to ask more questions. The moment he dies, all questions are off the table. And that's a direct turn. You could get into whether has his wife grieved properly? Has she been weird? It's an interesting topic of discussion, but I'm not sure it's truly informative on the events of September 10th, on whether or not Charlie Kirk was killed by Tyler Robinson or not. I think that goes more to what is the mentality of TPUSA now that he's gone.
Well, I know because of the coverage that you've been doing, you kind of approach this as a defense attorney, but I would like to get just a journalistic analysis from both of you guys. If Tyler Robinson did not pull the trigger, why was he there that day? Do you believe he was there that day? What's the benign explanation? Has anybody presented one? Has there been an alibi given from Tyler Robinson? Because to the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been one forthcoming. I'm trying to steelman kind of the prosecution for once, because I rarely do that. Like, what was he doing? Does anybody have a clue?
I think he was there. I think he was in Orem, Utah. Whether or not he was on campus at 12:23 when the Big Bang happened, I don't think has been established. But I do believe he was there. I believe his car was there, and I believe in my heart of hearts, and I have reason to believe this, that he was part of some operation that he was aware of. Whether or not he knew it was going to result in the death of Charlie Kirk, I don't know. But I do believe he thought he was part of a criminal operation that day. But I do not believe that he was on the roof. I don't believe he took a shot with a 30-06, and I don't believe he killed Charlie Kirk.
Wow. That's pretty revelatory. Are you going to be able to unpack that further in the future?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I will stay tuned, because I'm chomping at the bit, or champing. I got to get my grammar right, because I got Buckley on here. Anyways, Buckley,
I saw your theory, Baron. I don't mean to interrupt you, Clint, but I saw your theory the other day, Baron, and I thought it was so compelling when you referenced that Tyler Robinson had been involved in video games, something I don't know a lot about, but that he'd been involved in the video game community. And then you said, picture yourself as this man who's been called into the UVU area, and then he discovers that he's had these text messages that he didn't write. And then what does he do? And he reads the text message and he suddenly realizes Charlie Kirk's died, that he's being set up for the murder. And what does he do next? And he calls the people who he loves and trusts most, calls his parents, and then he turns himself in. I thought that was so compelling and so plausible a theory, which I think is your theory. Is that correct?
It is. I will say this. I think it's a strong possibility, or strong probability even, that that's what happened.
Let me just add too that Diligent Denizen had text message communications, allegedly, I don't know, I haven't been able to fact check this myself, but with a relative of Tyler Robinson that claims essentially all of that to be true, that Tyler Robinson never confessed, that the reason that they, quote unquote, turned him in was because they feared for his life, that it was not because he was guilty. So it's important to understand that there are allegedly people in his family that feel in alignment with that statement.
Yes.
I think, and again, I don't know, whether that will come out in court, whether they're holding that for the trial. But I do think there's a lot of merit to that he realized he was being set up for it and he turned himself in. Now, I have heard that he turned himself in very early in the afternoon, not late in the evening. And if that turns out to be true, that throws the prosecution's timeline all off. It throws the entire FedSlop narrative completely into disarray, because their entire narrative depends on him turning himself in after 9:00 p.m. And if he was in custody before 6 p.m., let's say, maybe as early as 3 p.m., we have a real problem on our hands, because now we have a multi-agency cover-up. And it starts with Sheriff Brooksby holding a press conference saying he first got a call at 8:02, and he had never heard of Tyler Robinson, and Tyler Robinson was not in custody before 8:02. Now, if you want to look for extrinsic evidence supporting that reality, a news organization also caught wind that he might have turned himself in early and requested the video footage of him turning himself in, which Washington County refused to provide. And then they waited and dillied around long enough that then they said they deleted it. Oh, well, that's just, we didn't keep it because it violated our retention policies. It went beyond 30 days. Well, that would have been fine, but for the fact that there have been pleadings suggesting that video footage actually does exist, and it's in the hands of law enforcement, and there's a debate over whether or not they're going to get access to it. That video footage is definitive. I mean, it's definitive if he turned himself in between 3 and 6 o'clock. Right. It's definitive that there's a multi-agency cover-up and that Tyler Robinson is being framed. If he turned himself in at 9 o'clock, well, then we just go forward with the, probable cause hearing in the trial, and let's figure out if he's the one who did it or not. But that is such a definitive way to rule out that he did it alone that I don't understand why we don't have access to it, why we don't know the answer to that question. What time did he turn himself in?
I'm also bothered by the fact that we still don't know where his shirt was, where Charlie Kirk's shirt was. Just to briefly unpack the explosive or directional charge hypothesis, because of the confusion or just seemingly inexplicable 30-06 entry wound that we're all supposed to believe in. A lot of people have been hypothesizing about there being a microphone explosive of some variety. And obviously, Baron, you've done incredible work at trying to come up with kind of supporting evidence, which goes along with a contract for the development of a micro explosive device, and then that facility exploding inexplicably 1 month after the attack. So I don't know if we have time to unpack all of that. But at this point, if you believe that Tyler Robinson was in fact involved, do you think that he was privy to the mechanism that was going to be used? Do you think that the explosive was, well, I guess you haven't even said definitively whether or not you think there was a shape charge that was used. So where do you sit with that right now?
Well, when I determine what to cover, it doesn't mean that I necessarily believe it. It just means I think there's enough evidence there that it needs to be considered by hundreds of thousands of people who might tune in and hear it.
Sure.
I think there's enough evidence that something might have caused an electrical malfunction with either his microphone or something else that caused some of his posturing. So I went forward with that several months ago and said, is anybody out there an expert who can evaluate this footage, evaluate his posturing, evaluate the technical equipment that was used? How would something like that happen? Because I thought there was enough merit to it just looking at the pictures. Same thing with the exploding microphone. You've got what looks like broken tempered glass that might even have Rode Microphone logo on it. Clearly, in my opinion, something moved under his shirt that's inconsistent with a rifle round to the neck. You have a necklace charm or something going up towards his neck at a very high rate of speed. It looks like his shirt moves before the wound on his neck appears. Like when you first see the shirt start moving, there is no wound on his neck that I can see. And so I think there's enough merit to that argument to put it out there and say, hey, this is being discussed. And as you do that, what you get is a flood of tips, electricians, electrical engineers, microphone experts, explosive experts, and they all come in with tips. And then it starts being discussed on social media. That doesn't mean I necessarily subscribe to he was killed by a shape charge with a Rode microphone. It means I think there's enough evidence here that it needs to be explored, and it needs to be explored in the open marketplace of ideas to determine if there's any merit to this or not. And I do subscribe to the fact that something other than a rifle round killed him. I will say that.
Okay, interesting. And I would love to just this is what makes me so angry with TPUSA is they get so furious with us for asking these various obvious questions, but it's hey, you guys could just tell us what the broken tempered glass was that was on the floor of that fucking SUV. How about that? Have you even considered doing that? Just being forthcoming? Oh, it's so frustrating. Buckley, I wanted to get your thoughts on this because I'm really, I've gone back and forth on assuming that this was a larger conspiracy, that it involved intel agencies to take out Charlie Kirk. What is your belief as to the why? I'm not saying you need to make a definitive statement, but why would, because in my view, it would have to be a domestic intel agency working, whether there's a foreign one involved or not. The FBI would have to stand down at minimum to allow for this to happen. At least that's my read of things. I'm just curious what your thoughts are as to how this may have come to pass.
I think you're right. I think there would have to be, obvious complicity on our governments. We control the scene, we control the investigative bodies, we control the narrative in America. So even if it was a foreign power, it'd have to be in concert with our own. I think the incentive is pretty clear in that Charlie controlled the largest, most powerful grassroots organization of young people in America. He was instrumental in Donald Trump's election, the work that he did, the organization that he led, mobilized a ton of voters, identified a lot of new voters, was great at getting out, motivating people and propelling a message. So there's that. They were He was the head of a powerful organization that needs to be on your side. If you're looking at Israel in particular, which I think you have to, Charlie was their biggest cheerleader for a long time and was responsible for propelling a Zionist message, I think, effectively up until he started having questions about it. So I could see why Israel would be nervous if Charlie Kirk was having second thoughts, and he was beyond that. He was, anti-war. He was very, very clear, clearly expressed. He didn't want us to go to war with Iran. He was one of two very strong, courageous advocates to go to Trump and say, you can't do this. Can't betray your country, can't betray your voters, can't get involved in something that you cannot predict, but that is almost certainly going to be really bad economically, politically, everything. So the incentive or the deterrent Charlie represented for the aims of people who want to take us to war is clear. And then beyond that, what I think you touched on it a little bit, but I think we could probably document a lot of changes that Turning Point has taken beyond what you said, Barron. I think you're right, but we can't leave out Thomas Massie, who was Charlie Kirk's favorite member of Congress. He expressed multiple times, and then Thomas Massie, who represents also an obstacle to the same neocon warmongering aims, and was effective at that. So, and Turning Point was inconsistent about Charlie's as an organization, how they felt about what Trump did in Iran, as an organization about how they were going to support Massie or not. I could go on.
Most podcasters right now with a high-profile panel like this would be bombarding you with ads. I am not doing that. One, because I'm a huge podcast fan and I hate ads. And two, because I'm just not greedy. I don't need to do that to you. So I choose not to. But if you want to support the show, at Liberty Lock Pod on X, you can subscribe there. I will follow you back. If you don't care about that, but you still want to support the show, libertylockdown.locals.com is an easy way to do so. It's only a couple bucks a month, but it does really help to keep the lights on, keep me moving forward, and keep me motivated so I can deliver more episodes for you. The series that I'm doing right now is essentially my AFAFO series. So it's America First and Fucking Only. Sorry for the profanity, but that's how I feel about it. And the first one was Dave Smith and Ian Carroll. The second one was Harrison Hill Smith, as well as Owen Schroyer, both former InfoWars guys, or one still is. And then today, obviously, with Buckley and Barron, I will continue to do these series. I'm looking to get Anna Kasparian on the next one. So, yeah, it's good stuff. I think you'll if you enjoyed this one, you will love those. I promise. Check them out. Oh, and then last but not least, if you guys could subscribe, I would really appreciate it. I am 4,500 subscribers away from 100,000. You could get me a little platinum silver plaquey thingy, and I would like that. So please do hit the like button and hype. Thanks again. Yeah, they abandoned much of his seemingly very sincerely held beliefs. I took that last one personally because it was Thomas Massie, who's like my guy. That's like the only libertarian we got, basically. So that pissed me off beyond belief. But then also, I'm hugely non-interventionist or anti-war, and the fact that Charlie spent a day or two, according to Joe Kent and others, lobbying directly to Donald Trump to not do a ground invasion against Iran. And I think he was trying to prevent even the bombing of the nuclear facilities. He was trying to prevent all of it. Obviously, if you're on Israel's payroll, which I don't know if he directly was, but if you're receiving Zionist donor bucks and you are actively going against the foreign policy interests of the Zionists, well, then it's fair to assume that your life might be in jeopardy, especially if you have the president of the United States ear. I think one other interesting variable that I don't think we've unpacked yet is why do it in this fashion? It strikes me as assuming that the hypothesis about Israel being involved and our intelligence standing down, assume for a second that that's true. It seemed as if they wanted to send a message that, like, this is not just a Candace Owens or a Tucker Carlson. This is like, you were kind of like the mob boss when they touch their face right before they say you betrayed me. That's the vibe it gave me, is like, we're going to make this very graphic, very in your face, and we're going to send a message to everybody else that's on our payroll. Don't you ever cross us. That's the feeling it gave me. Any thoughts from either of you?
Would a scarecrow be effective if you buried it in the furrow? I mean, right. Honestly, it's only effective if you can see it. Mm-hmm. And this particular country has done that before.
Famously.
Yeah.
Tens of thousands of times.
Yeah, exactly.
It's unbelievable.
I'll add that I talked to several high profile, but medium profile political figures in the immediate aftermath. The first few days after Charlie Kirk passed away, and all of them sort of unanimously said the same thing. We're all going to keep our heads down until we figured out what happened. Had Charlie Kirk had a heart attack, walking around his neighborhood, people don't have that same reaction. And so if you want to send a message was sent that this could happen to you too. And I think other people have probably stepped up their security, doing fewer public events until they get real final understanding of what happened. Because if you think about it, it's really a binary choice. Either Tyler Robinson solely planned and executed Charlie Kirk, or it goes all the way to the top, because you have the governor of Utah and the director of the FBI directing the paving over the crime scene 4 days later. You have a multi-agency cover-up from the very beginning, if it wasn't, Tyler Robinson solely alone doing this. And so by doing it publicly, by everyone kind of winking and nodding and knowing that it was a multi-agency cover-up, it sends a lot of people sort of scrambling for cover, and they're really questioning the things they say. I compare it sort of to Andrew Breitbart. I always feel like Andrew Breitbart was taken out. Breitbart had a heart attack walking back from a bar. He was 42 years old. It was not like he was 78 and severely overweight and, a chronic, chronic diabetic or something. I mean, he wasn't
Randy Fine.
Yeah, correct. He wasn't
Randy Fine is waiting to explode.
But Breitbart wasn't in great shape, but it didn't really have much of a public effect. It didn't have a chilling effect on speech when he passed because of the way he passed. If you want the death of Charlie Kirk to have a chilling effect, you've got to do it in public like that. You've got to make it look like it was some sort of horrific event. And we're going to blame the patsy so we can launch a war on the left. But at the same time, everyone's going to know. Everyone's going to know. And that's kind of what it feels like to me. They almost wanted everybody to be asking these questions.
Yeah. And I think the other, I don't know if it's a side effect, but it's been a very big filter for me. It's been a distillation mechanism that, like, the same thing that happened during COVID, the same thing that happened with the Iran war. Basically, anytime there's a crisis, you see who are the cowards and who are the people actually truth telling, who are interested in the truth, who have any level of courage. And I've been disappointed to find out there's a whole lot of fucking cowards out there, man. There are so many people that I know like for a fact that many of these people have to be looking at these things and coming to many of the same, I don't know, I won't say conclusions, but same questions the three of us have presented today. And they aren't saying shit about it publicly. They're saying nothing. It's like it's not even happening. And it's one of the biggest stories in the world. So it's not as if it's not a ratings grab if they wanted to pursue it. It's that they're fearful, like for real fearful, or there's financial mechanisms that control them or whatever. It's just been very disappointing. And I think, just to put it out there while I have the opportunity to, since you're here, Buckley, this is what has greatly increased my opinion of your brother, and you for that matter, is that, he's got all the reason in the world to play ball and to stay quiet and to maintain his proximity to power with Trump. And instead, every single day, he is needling the most powerful man in the world, calling him, he says he's coward, he's weak. He just keeps poking the bear. And it honestly, it's jaw dropping to me, because I understand that he must understand what kind of danger that puts him in. And it just doesn't prevent him even slightly. It doesn't get him to slow down at all. What is it about the Carlson clan that allows you guys to see these things in this fashion and to proceed with such, sorry, I'm being so flattering, but such courage? Because from an outsider, that's what it looks like to me.
Well, my brother is certainly very courageous and principled, and I couldn't be more proud of him and impressed by what he's done. He leads a virtuous and happy and very productive personal life, and he has literally no fear and is impervious to opprobrium and criticism. I mean, all he cares about is the small group of people around him, his faith in God, his family, his children, his personal relationships. But he's committed to the truth, and he's ballsy. It upsets me because it's clear that people not only want to destroy him, but also, kill him. I would just go back. I could talk more about that. It makes me a little uncomfortable, but I would just say, yes, I agree with you, Clint, when you say you see a catastrophe like this or some earth-shattering thing like COVID or some massive conspiracy that's designed to kill people and destroy our country. And it reveals, it's like a colander of truth and courage. But I would just say the one thing I think you missed, although I know you thought about it, is it's bizarre to me, and Barron and I talked about this off camera recently, is like every single person who attacks those who are seeking the truth on Charlie Kirk's assassination, they all belong exclusively to one ideology, and it's the neocons, it's the warmongers. Every single one who will call you nasty names and call you a demon and calling Candace a demon daily and assailing you and assailing Barron, and anybody else who questions the narrative, they all come from that same side. And you want to say, hey, wait a second. I thought you guys, one, you're very well financed. Two, you're, legendarily smart. So you never actually really considered that people might notice that every single person who is calling for the death of Candace Owens and calling everybody else a fucking demon wants war with Iran and wants to expand Israel in the region and like continue killing women and children. Like, what is that? You didn't really consider that people might notice. It's a real question. It's shocking to me. I think about it all the time. I mean,
it's so obvious and almost insulting that, how are you all in lockstep? How are all of you in lockstep? Like, there are people who aren't, I know a lot of people who are critical of Israel who don't think that Israel was behind the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I know a lot of them. Dave Smith, right. Good friend of mine. He doesn't go down that path. But I don't know a single Zionist that is like actually open to discussing this, like really actually digging and trying to figure it out. And it makes you feel as if they're all on a script. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I think what I said to Buckley in response to that was you would think that they would be smart enough to go hire 10 people. Like just pay them off. Here's $100,000. I mean, it cost them $1 million. Here's $100,000. Go out there and be a rabid anti-neocon, but support the Tyler Robinson narrative and attack Candace Owens. If they did that, it would throw enough confusion into the public conversation. People would say, well, maybe these people are acting in good faith, but they're not. Yeah. They're not. There's not 10 people. There's not even 2 that I can think of.
The battle line.
It's such a genius point. I'm sorry. I neglected to mention that, Barron. You're absolutely right.
It's really, I mean, it makes you feel as if they are just purely functioning off of script. Like there is almost no real philosophy or principles behind any of our opposition. I don't want to put it like that, but that's how it feels, is that these people feel as if they are my opposition at this point. And I think that really the dividing line is, you don't have to agree with me on everything. Obviously, you can disagree with me on a ton of things, but these people are so cult-like in their mantras, and it comes across as if like, oh, here's the new talking point. You can almost feel it when it gets rolled out. It doesn't have any. It's almost like a Turing test, whether or not there's consciousness behind any of this. And sorry, Laura Loomer, but oftentimes I question that with you. Anyways, I'll get off my bandwagon with that. But what is there any tools that we could use to fix this media environment? And as you know, I'm a libertarian. I'm not like trying to get the state involved here per se, but it is a huge battle when it seems as if there is one country that is able to acquire and deploy propagandists on their behalf in America. And it's like the one country that, even if you point it out, you're an anti-Semite. But if China were doing it, obviously you'd be a patriot to point it out because that's treason. So other than just having a more educated, aware populace, is there any tools? I don't see the Trump AG prosecuting any of these people. So it's just, are we on our own? It feels like we are.
If we don't have universal principles and universal standards and universal laws that we apply, it's all sort of ad hoc, like makes no sense. But yes, I don't know the answer. Sorry, Barron. Do you have an answer to that?
I really don't. I mean, I think it gets down to honesty, and there's such a lack of it right now. You go back to our nation's founding. I've been kind of reading a lot of that the last couple of weeks leading up to the 4th of July, 250th year of the founding and all that. You go back and read all that, a lot of their writings, and they talk about the integrity it would take to be self-governing. And if that integrity, if that honesty, if that honor goes out of the population, then the whole thing will collapse. And that's a little bit what it feels like right now. Because as you said, I don't think a lot of these people necessarily believe what they're saying, whether they're being co-opted or peer pressured or paid off. I don't know. But it doesn't seem like you have a broad swath of true believers saying these things because, as you eloquently pointed out, Buckley, the 1-to-1 ratio of people who hold a certain particular foreign policy objective and how they act in the public square around everything. It's not just Charlie Kirk. It's what's going on in Gaza. It's what's going on in Iran. It's what's going on all over the place. Whether Russia is a horrible, evil empire. What should our policy be with Taiwan? I mean, it is 100% lockstep across the board, and that's just not natural. That doesn't happen in public discourse. People should have different opinions on these things.
Yes.
I wanted to actually go a little bit deeper on that. I feel as if many people are along the same lines of that morality calendar or colander that you talked about, Buckley. I feel like those that are not falling through the colander, that have some substance to them, are also being drawn towards God and Christianity, religion, spirituality, largely because they're seeing all of their peers fall through the holes around them, and they're going, oh, this is dark. This is dark shit. I need something to hold on to. And I think maybe I'm just extrapolating my own personal feelings, but certainly after Charlie Kirk died and then my dad died a month later, I have been drawn fiercely into spirituality in a way that I had never been before in my life. And it began during lockdowns because that was such overt evil.
Yes.
What do you make of this period? I don't know if you go down the line of like thinking in terms of apocalyptic terms, but is this just a new epoch of people essentially realizing that they're surrounded by immoral, evil people and finding God as a consequence of that? Or is it something bigger? What's your feeling about all this?
It's funny. I'm in the middle of writing a piece that I started writing in the shower this morning in my head, and I hadn't finished it before. I was hoping to finish before this podcast. But I consider it a total blessing, actually, what has been revealed. You can be overwhelmed and dispirited and shocked that our government, who I, the entirety of my life, thought was generally on our side, was generally well-meaning. Obviously, the foundation of it's very clear in our Constitution, and the rationale for our government and our country is easy. But it has been so bastardized in my lifetime, especially in the past 30, 40 years, that you could get overwhelmed and sad by it. But I started thinking, actually, it's such a blessing that we notice, that we're aware, actually, when you look. I think we all come from a subsection of people who actually consume a lot of news, think about a lot of things, notice stuff. I don't think that's true necessarily for the rest of the country. I think it has really become true in the last 5 years since COVID and in the COVID aftermath, when people are like, wait a second, my government doesn't have my best interest in mind. They don't care about my children's future. They've totally mismanaged the economy for our entire lives. They've totally mismanaged our power. Then Trump comes along, betrays his base in such dramatic fashion, but not just the base, but betrays the country that, vested this power in him. And everybody on this call, I'm certain, and everybody who voted for Trump thought this was an existential election. We had lived through all the craziness, all the anti-American attitudes of the previous decade, from Obama and then through Biden and the stolen election and everything else in COVID. And now it's actually, anyway, back to my point, it's a blessing now because more Americans are paying attention, more Americans recognize not only that our government has been co-opted and taken away from us, that we're not sovereign, that we're not a sovereign nation anymore. And then when you see public polling, younger generation, but also the majority of Americans who say, hey, wait a second, Israel is its own country. Israel may be a fine country, but it's not our country, and it shouldn't be dictating how we spend our money and how we deploy our, young fighting men and the decisions that we make. So It's a long-winded way of saying, yes, I've noticed it since COVID. I think a lot of people have recognized that this is a spiritual battle. A lot of people have turned to religion, Christianity, and others, and said, this is where my strength comes from. And this will be the solution of seeking out of truth and spirituality. It's heartening in the end, I guess, is my point, my long-winded answer to you. I find it to be.
Yeah, the way I described it, I guess it's the same thing that happened during COVID, but obviously it was much more profound when my dad died, was I found additional reservoirs of strength within me that I did not know existed. And I feel similarly basically every year since lockdowns. I wish I didn't feel that way. But there has just been additional turmoil and plight and roadblocks that are thrown up by a state which, at least theoretically, is supposed to be functioning on my behalf and seems to be doing the inverse of that as aggressively as humanly possible. It's very disappointing, but it's also simultaneously heartening that I've found so many kindred spirits walking the same path that I am. So I guess you take the good with the bad. I know, and just for the record, I laughed off the idea of a spiritual battle for a very long time. I was like, yeah, there's bad people, of course. I mean, there's been murder throughout human history and child abuse and all sorts of evil things that have happened, but that doesn't make it a spiritual battle necessarily. And now I'm like, okay, no, maybe it is. Maybe it actually is. If you're going to kill tens of thousands of civilians in front of our eyes, in HD, and then accuse everybody who opposes that of being hateful and evil, boy, I don't know what to call that. It just feels like the inversion is the spiritual battle. But I want to get Barron in here because I'm sure you got some to add, man, especially after what you went through this morning.
Yeah, well, for those that don't know, I came from a funeral this morning. The priest gave a really good homily on suffering and how suffering drives you back to the cross. It drives you back to Christ. And that faith is at its weakest when everything is great. It gets back to Jesus and the rich man has a tough time going to heaven. It's not that God hates wealth. It's not that God wants everybody to be poor. It's that as you appreciate more the trappings of life and that finances can alleviate any suffering, that natural inclination during suffering to be driven back to the cross tends to go away, or you tend not to have it. You tend not to experience it. And so when you talk about COVID, when you talk about the death of a father or a friend, when you talk about the death of Charlie Kirk, when you talk about the notion that there is an active, evil, demonic, that word gets overused, but it's reality, dark presence in the world that causes an immense amount of suffering, it's natural that I think people would turn to their faith. And, here in the United States, here in the Christian world, that's typically to Christianity. But, as a Catholic, we actually can measure how many people are coming into the church every year. How many we know, because you have to take a class. It's a 9-month-long class. But when local parishes like mine are having to open new classes and emergency classes because they used to have 3 to 5 people a year in the class and now there's 70 or 100, and there's something going on in this world. And these are not people who are paying attention necessarily to Charlie Kirk. I think it's just the culmination of all of it. As you said, Buckley, you look the last 30 or 40 years, it's hard to draw any other conclusion than there is some real darkness in this world. And I think it's driving people back to Christ. And I'm thankful for that. As you said a second ago, there is that bright silver lining, that bright light in this very dark tunnel.
And as you said, we get the furthest from the cross when times are good. And I think for America, maybe you guys will disagree, but I feel like the American empire or the American experiment was at its apex in the 1990s because it was right after our only competitor, the USSR, had fallen. And we were sitting on, I believe it was less than $1 trillion of national debt. I mean, you couldn't have been in a better position as a nation. We had all of the economic might. We had the banking industry. We had the petrodollar system. The US dollar was reigning supreme. We had the strongest military. We had everything. And our number one and only competitor had just fallen. I mean, it's like everything. So it makes sense that in that environment, the nation, the people would fall away from God because everything is just coming easy. And unfortunately, it was just so terribly mismanaged, and we were really abused during that period because it was that exact decade when we shifted our foreign policy and we dedicated everything we were doing to Israel, in my estimation, that we really sacrificed what should have been a centuries-long lead, and we turned it into a 35-year lead. I mean, just an immense amount of sacrifice for no reason at all. Very frustrating. It's enraged me in ways that I struggle to express without just starting to be very profane. And I feel like for you and for Tucker as well, it seems as if there has been some revelation over the past few years, particularly our relationship with Israel, that like made you reflect on our foreign policy of the late 90s and obviously the 2000s, the war on terror. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that evolution, but also, do you think that Donald Trump was ever on our side? Or was he a con man from the beginning? Has he been compromised? Like, where do you fall on that, Buckley?
I wish I had a definitive answer about that because I have these discussions all the time and I still haven't arrived. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say that he's an opportunist and he doesn't care about other people other than himself and he's afraid, and I don't know. I really don't know. I'd like to think that he was sincere at one point. I certainly believed it. And the evidence was there that he was committed and that he was genuine. I want to believe that. I wish I'd give you a better answer. I do not know. I don't know. What is your opinion on that? Do you think he was a fraud from day one?
Man, I've gone back and forth. I mean, obviously, he's a showman. He's going to say things he doesn't believe to accumulate additional power. I just think the question is, was there an aspect of sincerity to the message that he was pushing forward, or was Roger Stone just script writing out of his mind and he's like, America First is going to crush. Like, just trust me. Just run with that. Make America great again, America First. Like, maybe he was just a cardboard cutout that was sold to us in our time of need. I personally,
he had been tested so hard, though. That's the reason why I'm on the fence is that he had been tested so personally. I mean, these people wanted to kill him. They demonstrated that.
Agreed, and that's actually that's what made me believe in him ultimately. Yes. Is because I was not a Trump supporter in 16 or 20 because I'm libertarian, but I did vote for him in 24. So I got duped. I was like, this guy, he has gone through the fire. And I was furious with him for the printing press and the lockdowns in 2020. So trust me, I was not fully in his camp by any stretch, but I was convinced because of the way the FBI treated him, because of the way the media treated him. I mean, he was looking at 800 years in prison potentially. I thought that there was a fair argument to be made about the 2020 election and whether or not that was legitimate. I still don't really know. And then the Butler attack, I'm like, this guy's he's got to be on the outside. Like, he's got to be, but then again, and maybe he was, but that bullet grazing his head was message received. Next time it's your kids, next time it's your grandkids, next time it's your wife. I just don't know. I would love to hear Barron break this down. Like, where are you at with it?
I'm a 6-time Trump voter, voted for him in the primary and general, all 3 elections. I was skeptical very early on in his run. I had a lot of friends in politics who were going to his early rallies. The first one at Lad People Stadium in Mobile, Alabama, had like 40 or 50,000 people, was unheard of in Republican Party politics. And I had a lot of friends that were like, you want to ride down there with us? And I was like, no, I'm not going to watch Trump. I wasn't a believer. And it was the showman capacity. It was that ability he had to just be a showman that I thought it wasn't serious. But over the course of the campaign, and I saw the lumps he was taking and how he wasn't bending, he was willing to lose rather than compromise his message. I thought, okay, I'll give him a shot because he said a couple of things that really piqued my interest. One was he was very much against the TPP, which was big at the time, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. He was vehemently opposed to it, as was I. I had been railing against it for the year leading up to his campaign. I was very opposed to it. I was trying to get our congressmen and our senators on the record opposing the TPP when I was on a little local radio show back in the day. And he was very opposed to it. He cited NAFTA as the reason, because NAFTA was a complete disaster and basically gutted the entire Midwest and much of the Southeast, the textile industry, the cotton industry, the steel industry, all just destroyed. Furniture making industry, all destroyed by NAFTA. And so that appealed to me. His trade practices, his trade policies appealed to me. But what really won me over was his foreign policy. He flat out said, we have wasted trillions of dollars that could have renovated every airport in America, every highway in America, rebuilt every bridge in America. We could have every elementary school child in the inner city going to $60 million elementary schools for what we've spent on these wars. Why is our country falling in on itself? We have major water mains in New York City that are made of wood, and we're spending trillions of dollars on foreign wars for what? What are we getting out of this? And so I put those two messages together. I thought, all right, I'll give him a shot. I voted for him in the primary, voted for him in the general. And I was extremely disappointed when, like 3 or 4 months into his first term, he bombed Syria. And I thought, this isn't what I signed up for. This isn't what I voted for. Total disaster, off to the wrong start, going to have to win me back over. And he did, because he immediately reversed pivot on that. He did not attack Iran when they gave him the opportunity and the excuse. And I thought, okay, he is serious. But what he did was he packed himself a cabinet full of political insiders. Instead of, when you get elected president, you have this opportunity to appoint thousands of people, 3, 4, 5,000 people to very high level positions in every administrative agency, intelligence communities, energy department, commerce. These are actual legitimate agencies that do real things. We like to make fun of them as conservatives, rail against them, but they're largely staffed with pretty decent people. But there's a lot of rotten eggs that should have been rooted out, that should have been removed. Political appointees that roll over from administration to administration, or he went and he outsourced it, because I knew several people trying to get an appointment at the time. And when they looked into it, they said you had to get in touch with Heritage Foundation to get an appointment. That's who was doing the vetting. And right then I thought, oh, we're in real trouble. This is not who I voted for. And what ended up happening was all the intelligence communities, all the major agencies, commerce, particularly commerce, all the trade organizations, up and down education, HHS, Fair Housing Administration, everything was stacked with political insiders approved by the Heritage Foundation. And it destroyed his first term. And I thought, maybe he's not serious. Maybe he's not.
They were all Bushies, by the way. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, they were all Bushies.
You're exactly right. And then he goes out and he gets Bob Barr to be his attorney general, when Jeff Sessions, his OG supporter, his very first supporter was Jeff Sessions, who made a disastrous decision to remove himself from the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. But that's a entirely other discussion. But then he goes and he gets Bob Barr. You can't get more political insider than Bob Barr to run his Justice Department. I thought, this guy's not serious. Now we're back to not being serious. And so I was skeptical during the 2020 election, particularly in light of Operation Warp Speed, which I was vehemently opposed to. I was telling everyone who would listen, I don't care if Trump's behind this or not. It's not going to be safe. It's not going to be effective. The shutdown was ludicrous. You're going to just completely tank the global economy over a flu, even if it is killing as many people as they suggest. You can't do it. Add misery to that by shutting down schools and businesses. But I went and I've dutifully voted for him in the primary. I dutifully voted for him in the general. And then the 24 election, I was very outspoken early on. I said, I will not support him for a third time. Absolutely not. But as the primary wore on, it just became obvious it was the only choice if we wanted any shot at a rational governing structure. And I thought maybe he had learned his lessons. He gets in and does the exact same thing he did the first time.
Well, even harder.
He gave us a few token appointments at the top. Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, they've turned out to be a total disaster. Pam Bondi, total disaster. But Ratcliffe at CIA, is that a good pick? Tulsi Gabbard at ODNI, is that a good pick? I looking back, no, I don't think so. And so I don't think he's learned his lessons. And if somebody keeps doing the same thing over and over and over again, I lose faith in them. And so I've lost faith in him because he's had the opportunity to fundamentally restructure the United States government over now 5.5 of the last 6.5 years. And he's just not done it. He's just not done it. And so at what point do I give up and say, okay, I'm moving on? The final straw for me was the Iran war. I still had his picture on the wall behind me until they launched the Iran war. Even after the June attack, I still had the picture on the wall. I took his picture down when they finally launched the Iran war because I thought we're past the point of no return now.
Yep.
This is not only is he not learning his lesson, he's all in with the people. He put people around him who despise him, who despise his policies, who despise everything he stands for. And now he's listening to them. And now he's just doing whatever they say. And so that's kind of where I stand on him.
What makes me so angry about it is that there is just no sales pitch to the American people for the Iran war. It's all downside. There's a massive sales pitch if you live in Tel Aviv. There is fucking zero sales pitch in America, as far as I can tell. I mean, the Strait of Hormuz, the petrodollar, 80% of goods moving through the Strait of Hormuz prior to the war were sold in the US dollar. That's a win. We already have our win scenario. That's all we need. We need it to be sold in dollars so that it undergirds the value of our currency. That's literally all we need. We jeopardized all of that. We jeopardized our entire financial, fortune as the reserve currency of the world, all to the benefit of a country with 9 million people and Mary Madelson and, a couple $100 million that went to put him into power. It just makes me so angry. Man, I feel it's a level of betrayal. I guess as a libertarian, I rarely vote for someone who wins. So this is a level of betrayal I'm not accustomed to feeling because everyone I vote for loses terribly. But this is the time I voted for a guy who won. So I feel this betrayal particularly deeply because it's like, there is just no, and then it's so insulting too, because there's no real attempt at a sales pitch, but also you campaigned on transparency and then turned around and became one of the least transparent administrations I can remember. With the Epstein cover-up was egregious. The fact that you're totally disinterested in finding out who almost killed you, President Trump, like, hello? And then any inquiries into Charlie Kirk, I take that personally too, because I feel as if Charlie Kirk was like really a ride or die Trump guy. And I have been disgusted beyond words with how they've gone about what I feel is participating in the same cover-up bullshit or obfuscation or overt lies, however you want to view it, just across the board. I'm just sickened by it. And I really feel as if like the reason I ultimately broke down and I voted for Trump is because as a libertarian, as an Austrian economics guy, I'm looking at, and for you guys don't know me that well, but prior to doing this and beginning this career path 6 years ago, I was a mortgage broker. I'm a finance guy. That's my background. So I'm looking at a 39 trillion, en route to $40 trillion national debt with $1 trillion in interest annually. And I'm like, we don't have time to fuck around. We don't have time for a Kamala Harris presidency. Like it could destroy us. And then Trump gets in there and it's like, all right, Iran war, the OBBB, the big beautiful bill, we're going to spend, now they want a $1.5 trillion Pentagon budget. I'm like, I had no options. So that brings me, after my long venting rant, that brings me to the natural next topic, which is Tucker talking about not voting for anyone in the GOP, even though I think he would ultimately cave and vote for J.D. Vance if he ran. Maybe we'll get into that. But helping to start a third party, is that real, Buckley?
I think it should be. I mean, I think the only part, everything you both just said was totally compelling. And I had a similar trajectory that you did, Barron, with Trump. I would just add in too, I was wildly offended by what he did to the J6ers and how he never fought for them or ever fought for anybody else in that wilderness period when he could command a stage and did. It was all about him. And the other thing I would say about what you just said, Clint, because I feel strongly about that too, is not only was there no coherent sales pitch, there was no rationale. They made no attempt at making a coherent rationale. And he employed like the utmost disdain, not only for his voters, but for the rest of the American populace as well. He said multiple times, he articulated very clearly a couple of times that the economic concerns of Americans is not his concern. I don't know what could be a greater punch in the face to your average American who's, not only trying to put gas in their car, but like paying their bills on their credit card, whatever, trying to afford $14 bacon. I mean, it's obscene. And then we didn't even touch on the Maha stuff, which is incredibly relevant too, because the corporate capture and the poisoning of Americans. And it all began around the time that you, I think, correctly identified the apogee of American power, which was after the Cold War. We had no debt. We were victorious. And as you said, we had all of these justifiable um, um, victories, but also sacrifices to get where we had been. And then it was around that same time, and I think Fauci was in power at the time when they relaxed all of these rules, and then made it okay, basically, to poison America and American kids. And we've seen it since 1989. Half the population's fat, and everybody's unhealthy. And it's all by design, and it's disgusting. So, yes, I think to go back to your question, the rationale, they've made it very clear. And Donald Trump, it was clear long before Donald Trump was elected that the Republican Party specifically didn't address the concerns of their voters, except during election year. They would campaign hard, and they would claim they had principles and claim they cared what voters wanted. And then they would go and govern on behalf of big donors and Israel. And Donald Trump, that was part of his campaign message, as you'll recall, for 8 long years, that the globalist nonsense was going to come to an end, and we're going to have a responsive politician in Donald Trump and a responsive leader. And he has revealed more conclusively, I think, than any Republican that's come before him, that it's all a sham and they don't care. And we haven't talked about the midterms, but it's just absurd that they think they're going to, I don't know how, other than employing, mail-in ballots, they think the Republican Party is going to win in November. But Donald Trump has pulled back the veil on so many things, not just American power internationally, not just naval power, not just our allies that we used to have in the Middle East and elsewhere that we've totally left to fend for themselves and not well, but that they don't give a shit about the average American and the average American voter. So they've destroyed Donald Trump and others, the Lindsey Grahams and everybody in elective office on the Republican side, pretty much, other than just a few individuals, have revealed utmost contempt. And so we are governed with our consent. I don't think the American people are giving their consent to this government. And I don't think Republican voters are willing to give consent to this kind of representation. So that does lead us to the opportunity, I think, for America-focused leadership. And I think it's finally, the first time in my lifetime, an opportunity for another party to emerge that articulates that they care about America and America first and only, primarily. And so I'm kind of excited to think that this might actually work. I think there's an appetite for it. I mean, if you poll, there are a lot more independently minded and independent identified voters in the country than there are, Democrats. So,
yep. The problem is the psychological or the game theory when it comes to voting day. People just don't want to waste their vote. And I'll tell you this, as a libertarian I was almost the vice presidential candidate against Donald Trump in this last election cycle. I lost by 30 delegates, so it was very close. Third parties are extraordinarily challenging. Because I know that Tucker is friends with Dave Smith, who's my buddy, I hope that he has a serious conversation with him, because we can save him a lot of time when it comes to all of the pitfalls that come along with a third party. The duopoly is structured in a way that it is almost impenetrable. And so I would imagine Tucker knows.
Its primary purpose is to protect its foundation.
Exactly.
I mean, the whole regulatory framework around it is designed for that too.
The GOP would greatly prefer that Kamala Harris wins than a Ross Perot or a Tucker Carlson. That's how the duopoly actually functions. But I did want to ask you a quick question, Buckley, about is it possible for, because my hope with voting for Trump this last go around was that, all right, sure, he's going to take a bunch of hundreds of millions of dollars from economic interests, special interests, foreign interests. But if he wants to be the hero that he's always advertised himself to be, he's got no reelection. So, he can tell him to stuff it. Like, do what your vote, like, you can decide, basically. You can do what your donors want, or you can do what your voters want. Your voters want this. You'll go down as a hero. Like, all right, let's see what you do. And it just doesn't ever seem as if it's even a consideration. It just seems as if, like, any time the interests of the American people versus the donor class or the foreign special interest class conflict, it's a given that Donald Trump is on their side and not on ours. So
It's a given.
My question to you is it even does the president of the United States president the United States? Like, is it actually him that makes these calls at all? Do you know?
I don't know. It seems not. And to go back to the Epstein stuff, I mean, I think the big revelation there was that there is this supranational power that occurs outside of elected politics. I mean, banking, whatever, Rothschilds, whoever it is. Sorry, I hesitant to say that, but who knows?
I like it, please.
It does not appear to be, to the extent, look, Donald Trump is the president of the United States. He could, unless he was driven purely by fear, which I think we've touched on why he might be afraid, or purely greed, for the benefit is, we haven't even talked about the whole business of his children and Witkoff's children and Lutnick's children and that entire class of people that have become billionaires to the detriment of a lot of Americans, actually, over this last 18 months. It's flipping disgusting what's happened, and I don't think it gets enough ink or attention. But anyway, he's clearly driven by
Trump
greed.
too has made a fortune off of his rug pulling shit coins. I mean, it's disgusting. Sorry, I just had to interject with that.
No, it is disgusting, actually, and I hope someone's held responsible. But no one's ever held responsible in America these days, or at least in my lifetime. So I don't know. I mean, it's the great question. Does he obviously wield some power, but to what extent? I don't know. And does he even have the interest in doing so? Because as you so rightly said, whenever there's a situation that pits working class or Americans against the interests of either a foreign nation or Mary Matelson or other big donors, it's not even a question where Donald Trump's going to go, because he reflexively goes there. I don't know. I do think, though, I have no sympathy. I have sympathy for people. My brother has described him as a slave, I think rightly so, a couple of times, because that's what you are if you don't have power and you're in his situation. But that would make you feel sympathetic to Donald Trump. And I don't feel sympathetic to him, because if he has some power, and he does, then he could be courageous and wield it for our benefit. He could, I don't know, hold a press conference and say, I'm under all of this pressure, and here's why, and here are the bad actors, and we're going to galvanize, the American people. Maybe that's totally naive, but I'm sorry, the man's 80 years old. He's been a success in everything he's done. He's got grandchildren. He's got immense wealth. What is the argument against doing the right and principled and courageous thing? You should.
That's what makes me so angry about it. And it's like, so the only justifiable explanation I'd be willing to accept, even though I still think it's cowardice, would be that my whole family is under threat, like everybody, and then I'd be like, all right, look, I can't tell you what to do in that situation. It's just like, it does feel, though, as if we're going to need someone who's willing to get into that position and just be like, I'm going to stare into the face of that, and I'm going to trust in God, and I'm going to forge ahead, and whatever the consequences will be, they will be. We have to have somebody at some point, or somebodies, we probably need multiple, that are willing to stand up and have that kind of courage. And I'll tell you, and I know Tucker has said he won't do it 1,000 times. He's not going to run. He's one of the only people I've encountered that actually has the public gravitas and the cojones to stare into that dark night and say, fuck you. Like, he's like one of the only people I know that could actually get into the position that Trump is in, but then not sell out. That's the vibe I get from him. You know him better than I do. Am I misreading that? And if he is that guy, why not run?
If you'd asked me that, I get asked this question a lot, and I've been asked this question a lot over the past decade, and I agree with your assessment about him.
And for the record, I like Tucker, and I don't want him to die. So maybe I don't even want him to run. I'm just saying, if there's an archetype that fits what we need, it might just be your brother. And I'm sorry to say it, I really am, but that's my honest assessment.
Thank you for it. I share it completely. I mean, I think he'd be well suited for the job. I also think he's one of the most articulate people around and principled. And he's got really, he couldn't love this country more and be a more, straightforward and honest person about it. He loves this country and has been infuriated by what's happened to it simply because of corrupt and negligent leadership. So yes, I think he'd be well suited to it. I don't know if he'd be allowed. I mean, the power structure is such that I'm conflicted because I love him so much and I don't want someone to.
That's how I feel too. For the record,
yeah. No, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
All right, Baron, it's your turn. You gotta go. You gotta run.
Sorry to be so inarticulate there for a minute.
No. Look,
you got emotional. I mean, and that's the human side of this, and that kind of gets to my thought on why maybe Trump doesn't do what you're suggesting, Clint, and why Tucker may not want to step into those shoes. I think they approach people with really a trifold approach to capture. One is the carrot, one is the stick, and one is personal examination. So the carrot is, we can make you wealthy beyond your wildest dreams. We can make you so wealthy that your 9th generation from now will still be living off of your trust fund. Like, you do not have to worry about anything ever again.
Yeah, the Lutnicks.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and we've seen that. We've seen that, but it's not just wealth, but power. You're going to be somebody. Or so that's the carrot. The stick is, like a lot of revolutionaries who fail, we will kill you and we will kill everyone so that's a horrific outcome, or we may leave you alive to watch them all get picked off before we take you down, so that you suffer before you die. So, it's the carrot and the stick. And then there's the personal examination part of it. Before you step into those shoes and are willing to hold that press conference that Buckley suggested a minute ago, you better make sure there's nobody out there. You better make sure you've never done anything that you don't want on the front page of the New York Times. And if you haven't, that doesn't mean they won't come up with somebody. They won't hit you with a Julian Assange. They won't hit you with a Graham Plattner or whatever's going on up there. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you had to have lived a pristine life. You have to live a pristine life that no one would believe anybody who comes out against you.
Right.
And there aren't very many people that can uphold and withstand that three-prong attack. And I don't think Trump can. I think they hit him with the personal attacks. He was largely immune from that, only because he sort of bragged about the fact that he was bagging Playboy models while he was married. And so that didn't really harm him like it would harm a lot of men. But the carrot and the stick, I think he couldn't resist. He has gotten disgustingly wealthy. He started out very wealthy. But it's not just the wealth. He's accumulated tremendous power, put his kids together. They have private equity firms, and they have, now one kid is buying an island off Albania, and I mean, this is multi-generational, not only wealth, but disgusting power. You mentioned the R word earlier, the banking family. You're talking about approaching power on that level being offered to you. A lot of good men can't resist that. And for those who can even resist that, a lot of people don't want to see their family suffer. And they don't themselves ultimately want to suffer that way. And so I think when you step into it, the system, the structural process prevents exactly what we're wanting.
What I don't get about this is that, again, you guys don't know me all that well, but I'm fairly financially, free. I had a successful business before I got into this, and I've never pursued this lane of things for financial benefit. Like, that's not what I'm here for. Yeah, I make a little bit of money doing it, but it's like, that's not the driving force. But the reason I can feel that way is because I've got a decent nest egg, because I prepared myself to be in this position. But I can't envision waking up every day and lying to my audience to make, 3 or 4 or 5 times what I make now. It's just like, it's just not a way to live. It's so destructive to my psyche to even think about doing that I don't understand how people can do it. And then I think about like, all right, so I've got a decent amount of money. Trump's got hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of dollars. And he's still reachable with the carrot? Like, you got to be fucking kidding me. Like, you are scum of the earth. If you have hundreds of millions of dollars and you will still sell out because you want to get your niece an island or something, it's just like, oh man, I almost hope it's not that. I almost hope that it's threats. I hope it's the stick, because if it's just carrots, man, you are scum of the earth. You deserve to be, have tomatoes thrown at you every street you walk down for the rest of your existence. If it sticks, at least there's like a rationale that's justifiable. I could have pity for you. Otherwise, I'm just angry. So I hope it's not carrots, man. I hope it's not just so you can get an island off Albania. By the way, did you see what they're doing in Albania to stop that? They're burning.
Yeah, they're upset.
Oh my God, they're burning down everything. It looks like they are not going to have that. Well, so Barron, would you consider a third party given where you're at on evaluating all this?
I think structurally, it would be an overwhelming undertaking to try to get a third party off the ground. I think at the top of the ticket, you might be able to pull it off. But what good is a third party president if he's being governed by Republican and Democrat House and Senate? Now you're not going to get anything done. So you'd have to necessarily set out to overhaul the entire system. Well, all your county captains, all your county chairs, both parties have that structure already built out. This is a structure that takes generations to develop.
True.
This isn't something that's done before the midterms because we think about it in June or July. This is something that if you think about it in 2026, by 2052, you might have it in place. And so I guess the question is, what are we trying to accomplish with a third party? Are we trying to take the presidency to put some executive orders in place and have control of foreign policy for 4 years? I mean, I'm okay with that. I'm not a bad starting point. If it's overhauling the tax code and rewriting trade policy and stuffing the Supreme Court with like-minded people and flipping governorships and state legislatures, guys, you are 2 generations away from even approaching something like that. That is such an overwhelming, monumental undertaking. You would need hundreds of thousands of committed people working around the clock to get that done in a decade. Again, the structure exists to perpetuate the structure. The Republican Party policies of 2026 resemble nothing of 1996, certainly 1926, or even 1866. The party adapts and adopts new policies in order to maintain just at a 50% of the population in order to maintain power for itself. The same thing with the Democratic Party. You go back to the election of 1892, the policies were a lot different. The platform looked a lot different than it does today. So what happens is, as there are these little populist movements that pop up, the parties will go in and capture them. They'll temporarily accept them. Oh yeah, we're all in favor of this economic populism for this year. They'll snuff out the third party attempt, and then they'll quickly do away with it once the momentum's lost. You saw it with Perot. You saw it with Ralph Nader. They'll go through and they'll adopt Ron Paul. Yeah. They'll adopt these positions temporarily, or at least give a hearing to them. Oh yeah, we're open to that. We'll listen to it. We'll bring it up for a vote. And then everyone goes, oh, okay, so we'll vote Republican. And then you never hear about it again. All the campaign momentum is lost. And again, it's that lack of a structure. It's that lack of a county level structure that can support a third party. And that's why I think I don't want to say it's a lost cause, because I think there's a lot of demand for it right now, but it needs to be undertaken soberly. It needs to be undertaken completely with an idea that we might be able to capture the presidency, and then we will have to work like hell in order to try to build out some sort of county level infrastructure in order to perpetuate this thing and make it something that lasts.
Absolutely, man. That's exactly right. It's a very, very, very high bar, and I think a lot of people that have not ever participated in third party politics do not understand that. They just think like, oh, it's like the only real challenge is just getting a third of the country to support the new party. Like, no, like it is a much, much bigger endeavor than that. And not to mention that if you ever get close to actually doing that, I would imagine that the the AG, the FBI will start to label you as terrorists or, domestic violent extremists. Like, it'll get ugly fast, especially if it's under an America First banner. Like, you've already see how they talk about the Patriot Front guys. The libertarians, my camp has been put under the domestic violent extremist category under the Biden administration. So it's going to be a major uphill battle. And by the way, let me just say briefly, Buckley, your reaction to me asking you about, Tucker running is exactly how I'd feel with my brother. Like, if he was perfectly equipped for it, I would still tell him, I love you too much. Don't do it. Just because the odds of really succeeding and surviving is just so slim. And it just sucks. It sucks to like actually be having this conversation and I'm being totally sincere. I'm doing this in America. This is supposed to be the place where we should be able to do that. We're not asking for a revolution towards communism. We're like trying to get back towards the Constitution. But that is now the revolutionary pathway, is to just believe in the Constitution. I think that's really dire. I know we're almost out of time, so I wanted to give Barron an opportunity to just, shoot the breeze with Buckley on whatever he wanted, because I know he was very much looking forward to this.
I am. I'm curious about Buckley's story. We hear Buckley's opinions all the time. I don't know where Buckley comes from. Like, I know he's a Carlson, and I know who his brother is. But I always hear
he's a hell of a
Buckley,
writer.
Well, yeah, he is. He is that very talented. But I always hear Buckley's about Buckley from Tucker. Right. Here's how Buckley. So tell me, what was your growing up like? Tell me from your perspective. That's what I want to hear.
Really fortunate. Well, I was just going to say, I've been, I've led a pretty private life. I've been a writer for 30 years. I worked in politics as a media guy, as a writer, and then worked in Washington for 30 years as a public affairs, crisis communication, messaging guy, but primarily as a writer, as a speech writer, as an opinion piece writer, working on corporate campaigns in the swamp. So,
do you feel like your childhood informed you and prepared you for that role?
As a writer, definitely. I've been a reader my whole life. My father was an investigative reporter, a journalist. When you could say that word without laughing, he was a reporter, and he was an adventurer, and he went after the story, and he broke a number of interesting stories throughout my life. He raised me and my brother alone early in Southern California. Our mom was a bit crazy, as some seem to be. Ours was particularly crazy, and left the scene when I was a little boy, and my father raised the two of us together in Southern California. Subsequently remarried, found my wonderful stepmother, and they had a happy life for the next 45 years. They both just died in these last 2 years. Had a really happy life. So we had it was a non-conventional childhood, very much so. My brother's a little older than I am, but my father raised us as, same roles, and traveled with him extensively on his stories and had dinner with him every night. And he taught us, to be forthright and inquisitive and honest, and to seek out, to be critical thinkers, and to be communicative. And as I said, he was a great writer, but he was really the most extensively read man I've ever encountered, and just interested in everything. In fact, his one admonishment to us, I'd say his primary admonishment, was lead an interesting life. Never say no to any opportunity, and grasp the nettle in everything you do. So we both worked from a young age. We both had jobs from a very young age. We both. I feel like I'm giving you a really long answer. Sorry, but
I asked. I always, this is just my mentality. I'm a huge Teddy Roosevelt fan. Teddy Roosevelt was raised in privilege, and Tucker has never hidden the fact that he was raised in privilege. But that didn't mean Teddy Roosevelt sat on the sidelines and just got fat and happy. Like, he was in the arena. He was a fighter. He understood American values. He understood the common man. And I feel that from you guys. And I just wonder, why are you guys able to to sort of be raised that way, but identify with the common guy and fight for the common guy? Why were the Teddy Roosevelts? Why are the Tucker and Buckley Carlsons able to do that? And why are so many other people not? Because I'm so mystified by it. And that's why I wanted to ask you the question. I never had the opportunity to ask your brother the question. And as soon as he said, you want to be on with Buckley? I said, yes, I want to ask him a question.
Well, I so appreciate it. I'm not really sure about the others. I just know that my father was an extremely hard worker, very straightforward, proud, very tough, the most uncomplaining man I've ever met. Just, never once. He was an orphan. He was adopted when he was a little boy. He was a totally self-made man who got kicked out of multiple high schools when he was a kid, had a, demonstrable wild side, and was probably the most individualistic individual I've ever met. He lived till he was 84, and never once saw him exhibit fear in any regard, like physically or intellectually. And he
sounds like a badass.
He was a total badass and a really loving man, but a very tough, uncompromising character in the ways that you would want someone to be. Loved animals, loved women. They loved him. And just was interested in every aspect of life, had tons of passion. And so he told us, he inculcated in us a really tough work ethic, and said, doesn't matter what you do, but whatever you do, apply yourself 100%. You take total ownership of anything that you put your name on. And as I said, yes, we did have, I'm certainly not wanting for anything as a kid, went to good schools, didn't take advantage of any of them, but, traveled a ton on my own as a teenager. And my father took us to a bunch of sketchy places when we were a kid, all over the world, and in sketchy places in America, and made us, didn't tolerate complaining in his own life and in his children. And we had, I think of my childhood as super happy and a never-ending adventure, basically.
I know you and Tucker are both very averse to receiving compliments. Was your dad also as hesitant to levy compliments upon you?
He expressed his love for us always. He was never unabashed about telling us how much he loved us. But no, he was not he was not a participation trophy guy at all.
Yeah.
At all. And averse to that shit in a big way.
The reason
he was not about building self-esteem. He was about, building experiences and demonstrating your worth through accomplishment and working. We had physical labor jobs from a young age.
Me too.
Learned how to build stuff. I had weekend jobs since I was 9. And also, just constantly working and doing stuff. And also, my dad was a huge proponent of individual responsibility, but also real merit. Like, doesn't matter where you went to school, because he didn't really go to school. Doesn't matter where you're from. It matters who you are, what you believe in, what you stand for. What you say is actually what you do.
Yep.
And you're ultimately responsible in every way for everything that you do. And you're not going to blame another person for your woes. There's a guy who came from literally nothing and had been abandoned as a baby and then abandoned again when he was like 2 years old. And then his adopted father died when he was 12. So he was on his own from the time he was 12 until he had us in his 20s and 30s, late 20s. But he was a remarkable man, actually.
I feel like he was like the sponsor for Dos Equis. He sounds like
I rode on the handlebars of his chopper when I was like 3 years old. I went skydiving with him when I was a teenager. I flew airplanes from a young age. I learned how to. I've been a pilot since I was in my teens. Something he encouraged me to do, and always wanted to do. I wanted to fly in the military, to give you one example of something. And I broke my neck in a boat accident when I was like 19, and dashed my military hopes. I had taken the ASVAB, had been accepted into the military. Was about to go into the military when it happened, and then had a full course correction and went reluctantly went to college for a couple of years, and then worked on a presidential campaign. I was lucky enough to get on a presidential campaign when I was like 20.
What campaign was that?
Lamar Alexander, who was the longtime senator from Tennessee, but he'd been the governor, and really good man, really decent man, smart man. And he ran for president. He ran for president a couple times. He ran in 96. So I worked for him from 92 to 96.
Okay.
Almost knocked Bob Dole out of the New Hampshire primary in 96.
I'm surprised you weren't a Pat Buchanan guy.
I always loved Pat Buchanan.
Okay.
Very much so. Yeah. No, I was always a huge idea-wise. Yes. No. Okay. I liked Pat Buchanan, and I actually knew Pat Buchanan a little bit. He was a friend of my father's, and
didn't he run in 92? Or am I wrong? He
did. Pat. In fact, in 92, he beat Bush in the New Hampshire primary.
Right. Yeah. And so that's why I was surprised to hear you were on someone else's primary. I'm like, you seem like a Buchanan guy through and through.
I was a Buchanan guy through and through. I'll just be honest. I think this is even truer now than it was when I was a kid. My father actually knew a lot of people eventually in his life, and did believe that, helping someone get a job or introducing you to someone is sometimes essential. I think in today's America, it's even more essential. Yeah. But keeping the job is on your own. So I probably had an inside track, getting the job, or at least getting the interview. I didn't interview with Lamar Alexander. I interviewed with one of his staffers, and then got the job and proved myself. I mean, I worked like 20-hour days for like the next, 25 years. I mean, I worked in campaigns for a long time, and then worked as a writer and as a communications guy in DC forever. Yeah. That's what I still do.
So that's even more Teddy Roosevelt than I had in my head, because, Roosevelt was very well traveled. Had a tough childhood, even though he was privileged. He was very severe asthmatic, and would have to be removed from certain environments and carted off into the country because the smog and the smoke was getting to be too much for him. Traveled all over the world with his family, hunted in Africa as a teenager. So he, I love the story. I knew there was something there because there's a certain character to it. There's a certain character to growing up, again, going to good schools, not really wanting for anything, but not just sitting back and kicking your feet up. We see that too much with people who grew up even upper middle class. I mean, even not even wealthy, just upper middle class, and then they turn out to be bums. And you think, what went wrong? What went tragically wrong? Well, Tucker, you said he fears nothing. He makes no bones about the fact that he's like, look, I'm going to speak as long as I can, and if somebody takes me out, then I've lived a great life. There's a character to that. There's something that's developed since childhood, and I just wanted to know what it was. Like, I think it's so
quintessentially the American spirit, and it does feel as if it's a diminishing good or diminishing trait. Like it doesn't seem as pervasive as, maybe this is just my own hagiography. Like I'm rewriting my childhood, but I envisioned that almost everybody around me when I was growing up felt that way. Like, I will die before I kneel. Like that was the American ethos. I felt it in me so deeply. And then I grew up to recognize that, like, almost nobody feels that way.
Culturally now it's become the matriarchy. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was injured as a kid, how many sketchy situations I was in, whatever. My father, didn't want us to die, but he had literally no tolerance for cowardice in any regard. We didn't have it naturally anyway, but we led like it was out the door. We drove or walked to school, several miles, like no bullshit, or drove our bikes. And then we had to be back for dinner. That was it. And just about the only rule in my house was you show up for dinner and you have good manners to your parents. And I don't know, that's pretty easy to satisfy, and good manners also to other people in authority who earn your respect. It was not this blanket idea of respect. And there also wasn't this societal attitude that, we are communal kids. That's bullshit. Like, I can't tell you how many times my father fought battles with liberal schools in Southern California in the 1970s. And how I did the same later in life in Washington, D.C.
I totally forgot that you guys grew up where I grew up. I grew up in Carlsbad, so you're La Jolla.
You were in Southern California in the 70s?
No, 80s, but I mean, well, 80s, 90s. I'm a generation younger, but still, it definitely. I don't know why I never even thought about that, but like, no wonder we have so many similarities. And then also, my dad was upper middle class, and I've thought about this a lot. Like, why did I have a work ethic, whereas other people in a similar upbringing don't? And my belief is that one, my dad had just got it because he was a first generation success. So I think that all of the traits that got him there, they still were passed on to me. Whereas like my kids, it'll be a bigger challenge, and the kids beneath that'll be a bigger challenge. It's like who's got the chutzpah to get to the top. If that's your great great grandfather, well then good luck to the great great grandkid. Like they ain't gonna have it. And then additionally, I think that it's something about a really high bar. Like there was never a shortage of love. I always felt very loved by my dad and my mom and my stepdad. But certainly they were not, as you said earlier, like there's no participation trophies. It was like they expected me to get straight A's. They expected me to try really hard at sports, whether or not I won the championship or whatever. It was just a very high bar, and I carried that forward. And I think oftentimes it's always like every young man of a successful father has a decision to make. Are you going to shrink into his shadow, or are you going to try and create a shadow so big that you can actually encompass his own? Like you have to have that competitive spirit, and your father either like breeds that instinct or he suppresses it. And it sounds as if your father helped to grow it. I don't know. That's just my read.
Definitely. And I would just say you're going to have success with your children, because I think half the battle is just being aware of it, being cognizant of the downside of, stifling your child. Yeah. We had had some very successful great grandparents, and my father, great, whatever, long line. And then my natural mother was of a generation where she and all of her siblings were like wastrels and waiting around to, inherit shit or something. And my father was repelled by that. And I've been repelled by that attitude. In fact, the one thing that drives me crazy is I'm constantly attacked as an, inherited money guy. I'm like, I literally didn't inherit anything. And I worked my whole life. So kind of wish I had inherited something, especially at this part of my life. Like, I'd love to own another house. I'd love to own my own airplane. But no, and I do, again, credit my father, because he was repulsed by that attitude that people have, the waiting around. It's like, what the hell are you waiting around for in any avenue in life? Like, right. You need to go, identify your objective and go grab it, and be nice to people on the way. Like, don't be a self-serving asshole. But
yeah,
no, I appreciate you sharing it. As soon as Clint asked me and he said, you have any interest in doing this? I said, I do. I've been dying to ask this guy a couple of questions, because I am so fascinated by you and your brother. There's a deep Americana attitude that we have lost in this country, that I feel like you both communicate very eloquently, very passionately. And you both take your lumps. I mean, I'm on X. I see the social media things. People just lob bombs. And I think, why? Why are we lobbing bombs at a couple of brothers who are articulating the American vision? Like that doesn't make sense to me. And the bombs are being lobbed by people who hate the American vision, who love this neocon sort of manage the decline of American greatness mentality. And we're firing away at the people who are trying to remind us that there's a greatness here, and that this country is beautiful and it offers you a lot if you'll take advantage of it.
Right.
So best country in the world, best people in the world too. Yeah. Most charitable. It's amazing the credit that America doesn't get. The Americans don't get.
I genuinely appreciate you sharing. I hope it wasn't too personal of a question.
No, I hope I wasn't totally inarticulate about it. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for it, but I'm certainly honest in my answer. And I'm really grateful for the life I've had, the life I'm having. And certainly for my parents. Oh, my father in particular. I wish he'd known him. So,
well, yeah. I'm grateful for your father too, because he created two great sons who have helped to keep the American spirit alive. Well, it seems to be fleeting. Baron, you're also one of those people I feel, maintains that spirit. You and I haven't done deep dives on our political beliefs. I'm not as big a Teddy Roosevelt fan as you are, but certainly there's still the American spirit that I like. I just Anybody that's still got that left in them, I feel like I can identify it right away. You guys definitely do. Tucker does. A handful of people I know still do. So I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to have a sit down, long form conversation with the two of you. Anything you'd like to leave my audience with on how they can read your stuff, Buckley, or where they can check out your show, Baron?
I'd be a big advocate of plugging your show, Baron, because I think it's great, and I'm a new convert. You can find me just on X at the moment, just Buckley Carlson on X, and I really appreciate it. Before we go to you, Baron, I really hope we can spend 1 or 2 minutes talking about this potential merger between the IDF and the U.S. military that's represented in this.
I totally forgot.
National Defense Authorization Act, which is on its face, because Netanyahu literally said up front that he wrote it, should be cause for treason trials like immediately. But I hope the three of us can help our audience understand how they can combat this and make a ton of noise and make sure it doesn't happen.
Well, I'll throw my 2 cents on that in a second. But Baron, first, Baron Coleman, you can find the show anywhere. But is there any other links?
Yeah, no. I mean, if you go to X, it's just Baron Coleman. If you search Baron Coleman on YouTube, you'll find it. There's a clips channel and a regular channel. Just make sure you're clicking the one that suits your fancy. One's long form, several hours a day, and one is kind of clipped out and a little more digestible for people with short attention spans. So,
yes, which is becoming more and more commonplace. Well, I just wanted to say, I did actually cover this on the prior episode of Liberty Lockdown. It was Section 219 of the NDAA, which essentially permanently intertwines both intelligence gathering as well as military and technological advancements and developments between Israel and America. And as you already said very clearly, and I think you're exactly right, it's treason. It's overt treason. I don't know how it's even possible. Your brother had on Dennis Kucinich last night, and Dennis Kucinich said the same thing, and he's right too. This is treason. I don't even understand the argument for how it's not. But I will say, I think it's if you want to find a silver lining, it is evidence of us winning, and I'll explain. They know that public support for Israel is diminishing so rapidly. They are trying to create a paradigm or a mechanism by which it doesn't matter what we think. It's just locked in. It's already, cooked into the saucer, however you want to put it. And I think this is their, I'm not saying it's their last attempt, but it's one of the kind of flailing attempts to make it so we cannot extricate ourselves from that relationship. At least that's my read of it.
I think the pattern we have with the Five Eyes community is even probably worthy of treason trials, as you said. We farm out to the Commonwealth countries, to Australia and New Zealand and Canada and the United Kingdom. We farm out our intelligence operations because we're not allowed to do them here domestically. So we farm them out to them. We let them spy on Americans, and then we say, "What did you learn?" I think that's hideous. This takes it to another level, and it's not just the particular country that it is. This type of entanglement between the United States intelligence community, the United States military, and any other country. I don't care if it's Canada. I don't care if it's Mexico. I don't care if it's Russia or Ukraine or Germany or France. No country should have that type of entanglement where we have to take administrative steps to extricate ourselves from even a particular issue, that they just have a global right to come in and learn on all these different topics that we're investigating. And I think it's nonsensical. I think it's treasonous. And, I'm obviously open to what you guys have to say about it, but I'm outraged by it. It's just, I don't know, what can my little show do about it? I've tried to bring it up a few times. My audience loves bringing it up in the comment section. But I would love to hear somebody has some idea of a way to try to push back on it before it becomes law. Well,
I mean, the obvious answer is to call your Congress, call your senators, but I think it's actually just a congressional bill at this point. I don't even know if they're going to have Senate participation in it, which is insane. I mean, this is so clearly like on the level of a new treaty, which should require, bicameral support or whatever it's called. So I don't know. I just think it's going to come down to, do they think that we will riot over it or not? And I think that's like, we're getting closer and closer to that point where every question as to what they will or they won't do just comes down to, can we get away with it? And I hate that paradigm because, like, obviously that's not a very highly functioning system where violence is ultimately the only decision, as to do or don't. But I think we're perilously close to that. And I'll just be straight with you. if there's ever a reason to be violent, it's permanently intertwining your country with another country, particularly a country that is currently at war with six of their neighbors. I mean, it's just so obviously treason. I just don't see an argument against it. Sorry.
Well said. Yeah, make as much noise as possible about it.
Exactly. Just get loud, ladies and gentlemen. Well, thank you again. Thank you once again, gentlemen. This has been an absolute blast, and I will continue to tune into Baron Coleman. But if you want to get the slightly more truncated rants, I deliver those over here on Liberty Lockdown. You guys could hit the like button, subscribe, make sure you hype this episode so it gets around to as many people as possible, and continue to lend support, not just to the two gentlemen on this panel, but also Tucker Carlson, who we have talked about a lot today. He has been under fire, and I'll throw Candace a bone too. She doesn't need it. She's already got tons of support, but she's also been under fire in a serious fashion. So I hope that, those that you see that are in the public eye, especially at the highest level, that are taking the slings and arrows, but still not bowing, I highly encourage you guys to lend your support to them, whether that's financial or verbal or whatever you can do. These people are vitally important because we are up against it. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. Peace.
Amen.
I hope you guys enjoyed that episode as much as I did. I absolutely think the world of Baron and Buckley. I love Tucker, as you can tell. Ian Carroll, Dave Smith, a handful of guys, Scott Horton, Tom Woods. It's a very small, tight-knit group, but man, when I can get a panel with two of them at the same time, it's like Christmas morning for me. If you enjoyed this episode, please do not forget to hype it. Hyping it basically just enables it so that more and more people who are not subscribed to me can see the show. And last but not least, if you could subscribe, I would really appreciate it. So subscribe and make sure you stay tuned for the next one where I'm working on some other big names that I'm sure you'll enjoy. See you soon.
Subscribe to Liberty Lockdown. Great podcast. Clint is tight.